What's up, everybody? It is Izzy. Couple of things. I am officially scheduled for surgery next Tuesday, June 13th. So I have exactly 4 training sessions left. But today will be Q&A number 82. So go ahead and get your questions in. I look forward to seeing what they are. I broke under 100 kilos today, so 220.1 pounds. So I figured I'd just do a little comparison shot of the last time that I was this weight, which was last July 3rd, apparently. Anyways, as always, friends, if you like the Q&A, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon for $1 a month. If you'd like to work with me directly, I have a very few slots left for half-price coaching. And, of course, my ebooks are always going to be found in the description box or in my bio on Instagram. If you do like this Q&A, is one last thing. I've been saying this because it really helps. Just hit the like button on YouTube. It makes a massive difference in the algorithm. And actually the like button on stories on Instagram as well. Anyways, look forward to the questions. Have a good one, folks. How long should you rest at the top when squatting for general strength and size? So this is a huge pet peeve of mine because there's no such thing as general strength. And there's definitely no such thing as general strength and size. So for hypertrophy training, you're only going to want to breathe enough at the top that technique or cardio isn't the limiting factor in the set. Because the longer that you sit up there and breathe, metabolites disappear, or they dissipate anyway, and you're reducing the amount of pump and stimulus proxies that you're going to get after the set. For powerlifting or strength training, breathe as much as you need to make sure that your technique is perfect. So, those are the best heuristics that I can give you. All in all, don't waste time up there. Only take as much breath as you need. What are the benefits of conventional deadlifts versus RDLs and vice versa? So let's start with the conventional deadlift. The conventional deadlift is going to use higher absolute loads across a very similar range of motion where the moment arms acted against most of the musculature for the back are pretty similar. So in general, you're going to get a better stimulus for the traps, for the upper backs, especially for the rhomboids. And in my experience, you get a better stimulus for the spinal erectors as well. Typically, you're going to maybe get a similar or possibly slightly better stimulus for the glutes because the moment arm at the hips isn't that much longer depending on how you do the movement. Now, let's talk about the benefits of the RDL. The RDL is going to provide a better stimulus for the hamstrings because it's going to fully stretch them. You're going to get greater degrees of hip flexion, and if you focus on pushing your hips back, you might get a slightly better glute stimulus or a similar glute stimulus because the absolute load will be lower. However, it definitely creates less axial fatigue, and it's easier to recover from on a set-to-set basis. So as far as which one that you should pick, you need to understand your own recovery timelines. A big issue that I see with a lot of people's programming is that they're just automatically trying to pick the quote-unquote highest SFR variations, but all that they're considering is actually F. They're only considering fatigue. If you're still a relative beginner or intermediate that doesn't struggle to recover from conventional deadlifts once a week, you don't need to use lower fatigue variants unless you're hinging twice a week and you want one of them to be the RDL. But if you can recover from conventional, do it. If you can't, look at RDLs. Do your Foost Olympic lifting shoes run true to size? So first of all, the Foost shoes are in European sizes, and I do not typically use European sizes for shoes. So I couldn't really answer that. I've also had them at this point for like 4 years, maybe, or 3 years, and they're falling apart. So they weren't super high quality, I will tell you that. That said, I recall me being between 2 sizes when I measured physically, and then I went with the smaller size because I hate Olympic lifting shoes that have a lot of room in the shoe. And I will say that in retrospect, I would not do that again. They are a little too small, and that has contributed to them falling apart as fast as they have. Hope that helps. Is doing lateral raises 3 to 4 times a week overkill? So a couple things, man. One, telling us that the frequency of something doesn't really mean anything. Because what if you're doing lateral raises every other day, like I do, for example, and you're doing 1 set or 2 sets? Almost everybody could recover from 3 to 4 lateral raise sets per week, and almost everybody could recover from 6 to 8 lateral raise sets per week. Now, if you're doing 5 sets or 8 sets and you're doing that 3 or 4 times a week, yeah, you know what? Maybe you could say that's overkill. But again, let's bring this back to the most relevant point. There aren't necessarily rules to anything because there's exceptions. So the only question that you have to ask yourself in terms of programming is this person regularly setting PRs using this frequency volume method? If the answer is yes, it literally cannot be wrong. I tried doing one set to near failure like you do. Why am I so sore? You know, honestly, anytime that you do something novel, it has the potential to make you really sore. Now, I will say that you may have been training much further away from failure than you thought if you're doing it, quote unquote, my style and getting close to failure. I often take my sets beyond failure. So, I don't know, man. People have different things that make them sore. Personally, I don't really get sore from almost anything unless I use massive amounts of intensity techniques and high volumes at the same time. So, soreness is not a particular stimulus proxy that I put a lot of value or a ton of stock into, and part of that is personal bias, and my personal bias against it is because I do not get sore easily. It takes a lot for me to get sore, and when I'm sore, it's usually a sign I overdid it. In your case, that's the best I got for you, man. Maybe you're not training close to failure as you thought. Can you gain muscle on a cut if you are 20% body fat? Well, man, you might gain muscle on a cut, but it's not worth talking about or thinking about at all because there's nothing special that you can do to decide that you're going to gain muscle on a cut. How do you maintain the most amount of muscle possible on a cut? By doing everything perfectly, by getting optimal amounts of sleep, by having optimal nutrition, and by having optimal training. If you have optimal sleep, training, and nutrition, at the end of your cut, you might gain muscle, or you might just maintain all of your muscle. So here's the thing. What are you going to do? Train less than optimally, eat less than optimally, sleep less than optimally, unless you're going to gain muscle? You can't decide to gain muscle on a cut. It'll either happen or it won't happen, but it's not really up to you. So yes, it's possible. Maybe it'll happen, but it's not something you can shoot for. Just be optimal in your training, nutrition, and sleep, and see what happens. That's the best you can do. I often add reps to my backoff sets every single week, but sometimes I fail to add reps to my top sets. Is that a problem? No, man, it's definitely not a problem if you're only progressing your backoff sets and your top set only progresses sometimes. However, this is one of the main reasons that I highly recommend that all of you guys use simultaneous double progression. I'll put a link to my YouTube video on this topic, but it's the basic progression model that I use in my own training and with all of my clients. And basically what we do is we micro load while using double progression. So for example, we'll have a rep range, say 8 to 12, and instead of just doing the same thing every week for weight, I will add about 1% load each time. So if I did 200 pounds last week, this week I'll try to do 202 pounds while also adding reps. And that's why I call it simultaneous double progression, because instead of just adding weight once you've maxed out your rep range, you add tiny bits of weight the whole time while also chipping away at your reps. So as long as you're still adding to your top set every once in a while, no big deal. But if you'd like to get that to go a little bit more smoothly, consider microloading as well. Do vacuums help in bodybuilding? I don't think they literally make your waist smaller, but they can absolutely 100% help you with your presentation during posing, as your stomach won't hang out as much if you build up your transverse abdominis with vacuums. Do you think that older people should train differently than younger people? So first of all, we have to be super careful here and define terms immediately, because I literally know kids who are like 18 that call me old at 32. And I know people who are 40 that call themselves old these days. Do I think that a 40-year-old should train differently than a 80-year-old? Yeah, probably. But we have to be careful because there's a huge gray area in there where just because you're a little bit older doesn't mean that you've already begun to face problems that are more common in some of the truly older populations. Truly older populations often have a little bit less volume tolerance, and due to just a lifetime of wear and tear, their joints are more prone to hurting. So it can be beneficial to train in higher rep ranges and really emphasize tempos and technique to make sure that we're not doing any sort of unnecessary joint damage to joints that already hurt. However, this is on a case-by-case basis. Not all old people need that. Do you have any experience using nandrolone as HRT? How would E2 be managed? So I'm not gonna lie to you, man. This bugs me when you have somebody who hasn't done PEDs yet and they immediately, with their very first thing, want to talk about something that's unique and different to the basics. Just run a little bit of tests like everyone else. Nandrolone was trialed on over 100,000 people, men, women, and children, and it's pretty much discontinued in most contexts for HRT, and that is because it actually does not convert to E2. It converts to a 19-nor derivative of estrogen, which in some people causes all sorts of problems. This is why some people have their sex drive tanked or have erection problems on nandrolone and others don't. Some people can handle 19 norestrogen equivalently and some people can't. Just use test, man. A movement offers more stimulus on a set per set basis when it has the most tension in the lengthened position. So this isn't a question, but it's a statement, and it is one that I agree with. However, something that we all need to keep in mind here is that it also likely produces more fatigue on a set per set basis. I still think it has a proportionally better stimulus to fatigue ratio, meaning though even though it creates more fatigue, it creates proportionally more stimulus as well. I just say that because it's very likely, in my opinion and in my experience, just watching tons and tons of amazing people train, that you're going to get the most productive volume in a session when you do lengthened bias work with a little bit of short bias work to top it off, as that's going to be the combination that allows you to still recover and get the most work in. Now, that said, some of you really need to ask if any of this even matters. If you can't bench 2 plates for hypertrophy reps, I promise you that the reason isn't because you don't have access to adjustable strength curve equipment. What business or job do you have other than coaching? Well, I own an Airbnb, which is a vacation rental home, and I also have some internet marketing revenue streams that I set up in my 20s, and that's as specific as I'm going to get about that. I can keep grinding on all movements except for rows and pull-ups / pull-downs. Is it optimal to do lengthened partials on rows and pull-downs? So it's important to keep in mind that you need to keep all of this stuff in context. If you are somebody who is progressing your rows and pull-downs / pull-ups as is, you are not missing out on some magical secret gains by implementing lengthened partials. Okay. On the other hand, if you have reached somewhat of a stalling point with those movements and you would like to experiment with a different variation, you can consider having a full day per week where you just do lengthened partials and you want to be consistent about the range of motion. For example, you will set it as only doing the bottom half or the bottom 2/3 of the range of motion, and you will stop the set when you can no longer get to that range of motion. You can also do this as an intensity technique on your very last set for that movement of the day, as if you try to do other sets after this, you're going to be totally smoked and performance will be way worse on all subsequent sets. Do higher rep sets cause more fatigue than lower rep sets? So whenever they test this directly, lower rep sets and higher rep sets produce the exact same amount of hypertrophy on a set per set basis. Now you could argue that maybe you can get in more lower rep sets if lower rep sets cause less fatigue, but do you know anyone who that's their practical experience in real life? Because I don't. Lower rep sets tend to be harder to recover from in my experience. While it very well may be true that lower rep sets somehow cause less overall central fatigue, they do a couple of other things. They cause more psychological fatigue in most people because most people have to get up emotionally for a 6 rep set, and they don't necessarily have to get up emotionally for a 15 rep set. The other thing we know is that, of course, lower rep sets on many movements will hurt your joints more than higher rep sets on certain movements. So on top of that, some movements are just awkward with lower reps or awkward with higher reps. So in my opinion, back in the real world, outside of the laboratory, the best thing that you can do is when you're doing a movement, figure out which rep range gives you the best SFR on that particular movement for your joints, for your brain, etc. And just stick with that. Using a mix of rep ranges is still going to be your best bet, in my opinion. Do you have a rehab plan for the bicep yet? How long will your arm be out of commission? So it'll be in a hard cast for at least 1 week, and then it'll be in a sling for a month. Typically, the tendon itself actually takes 3 to 4 months to fully heal, and that's when you can, at that time, begin sort of the more aggressive rehab of starting to load it and build back up. Now, that said, I'm most likely not just going to go to some random PT who doesn't know anything about hardcore lifting. I have a few friends that I can consult, and on top of that, I'm most likely going to do it myself because I'm going to use BPC-157, I'm going to use TB500, I'm going to be on human growth hormone, and I'm going to recover much faster than your average sedentary 6-year-old because I just live a lifestyle that is conducive to maximum physical recovery from an injury. So I'm going to trust my body and trust myself. I'm going to go a little slower than I like, but I'm going to do the rehab myself, and I'll probably heal faster than almost anyone. Is there anything special about the cybex hack squat? Why do so many bodybuilders like it? Well, first of all, it's on like more of a 60-degree sled than a 45-degree sled, so you don't have to load up an load of plates. Like this is a 45-degree leg press sled, and I've got, over 9 plates per side on here. On a cybex hack, I would put 5 or 6 tops. So it saves you a lot of loading, and for many people, it's just a smooth piece, man. The strength curve is good, and it doesn't hurt your knees, and you'll just find a lot of people that like it because of that. Dante and Dusty emphasize the importance of sessions that last 45 minutes or less. You and JP seem to favor longer sessions. Can you elaborate more on your thinking? Well, no, they don't, because I actually worked with Dusty directly, and there wasn't a single workout that he gave me that I finished in less than 75 minutes, and more often than not, it took me 2 hours, and he never made any specific emphasis about the workouts needing to be 45 minutes or less. I don't know any serious trainee in any lifting sport, strongman, bodybuilding, powerlifting, that routinely gets all of their sessions done in 45 minutes or less. That is just it could just be a talking point on the internet, to make sure that people are getting in and out in a timely fashion. But here's the thing. Here's the ultimate programming thing to keep in mind at all times, the heuristic, right? If you are regularly setting PRs with a method, it literally cannot be wrong. And you have watched me do this full body split for over 6 weeks now as an advanced athlete and PR all the time. Do you know any cheap sources of protein? So usually your best bets for cheap protein are going to be chicken. Get it from like a major grocery store. You can sometimes get bulk deals directly from like a butcher or a farmer on chicken and beef. The other thing is usually pretty cheap is going to be canned tuna. Now, obviously, there's some concerns with the amount of mercury that's in there, so maybe don't have that for every single meal. But tuna is definitely an option. And then this is going to piss a lot of people off because I think it's fucking disgusting, but tilapia is also dirt cheap, and it's dirt cheap because it tastes like shit. Now, some people like tilapia though, and you might be one of them. So tilapia, chicken, and tuna would be the top 3 that I would recommend for cheap protein. Alrighty, everybody, that is the end of the Q&A today. As always, I appreciate the questions. Definitely some interesting ones today. If you enjoy the Q&As, please consider becoming a supporter on Patreon. And even if you don't want to do that, something that you can do that helps me out that costs you nothing is just hit the like button on the YouTube video or even on Instagram on the answers that you find interesting. Not only does it help me know that I answered the question well, or in an entertaining way at least, it makes Instagram show it to more people. So that is always very much appreciated. If you'd like to work with me directly, I have a couple of spots left still for half-price coaching. My ebooks are in my bio on Instagram and in the description box on YouTube. Tomorrow we will get out another video in the best exercises for hypertrophy series. And I think that's it. So if you're seeing this on YouTube, again, please like the video. Leave any questions or comments you have below. Subscribe if you haven't already. And have a wonderful day, everyone. Peace.